Okay, North fans, well, we're joined by our General Manager of Football, Brady Rawlings, who, as everyone knows, has returned to the club. Brady, it's probably not the year you thought you were going to have back at the Kangaroos.
No, certainly not, Heath. It's when I signed up, it certainly wasn't. This wasn't in mind, but yeah, I think in these circumstances, Heath, when you're in a leadership role, you really need to do that, take leadership, and it's been an interesting period, and we're still working through it, but we're doing the best we can, and our people are the most important thing throughout this period.
I suppose most things in your position you can call a peer, you can call a mentor, and you can talk about what footy managers have been through in the past. But something like this is so unprecedented. How do you navigate your way through it, having never been in a role like this before?
Yeah, it's an interesting one with the experiences around the AFL, and clearly over time you get to know a fair few people at other clubs. So I have spoke to plenty from other clubs, but as you said, they haven't been through this position themselves. I even heard Brian Cook say in all his time in footy, this is, the Monday, I think, when he stood his people down was the toughest day he's ever had in football. So I think anyone that we speak to within the industry certainly has got experience and you can lean on, but no one's ever been through this before. So as new as I am to it, the others around the clubs haven't faced this type of period either.
If we go back to when it, I suppose, unfolded in a serious way for the AFL, we're playing against St Kilda. I was actually sitting on the bench, only a couple of people down from you, and we were getting word around quarter time of that game that it was highly likely that afternoon the AFL was going to call off the season or suspend the season. You're trying to get through a game at that point. You're trying to make sure the players aren't going to find out this news in the middle of the game. How hard was that to manage?
Yeah, well, clearly you're so invested in the game, and even though we were sitting a couple of spots away from each other, Heath, and we're pretty close, I had no idea that the level, in terms of the suspension and what was going to occur after the game. At that stage, I had no idea of the level of intensity it got to. It wasn't until we were walking to the press conference, I think it was, after the game, when you gave me more detail about it, and I realised that it was official. So I think it was probably still halfway through the second quarter of the Hawthorn-Brisbane match that was taking place at that stage, and we still had the West Coast Melbourne game to go to finalise the round. But in terms of our game, we were able to play the whole game out with no knowledge as to what was to occur or what had been occurring throughout that match. So thankfully we could focus fully on the game and we could deal with the issues after the game had finished.
With respect to that game, obviously we won. We got over the line, which was an amazing effort, considering we were 3 guys down on the bench. When you take into account what the players went through to get over the line in that game, and then you fast forward to now where there are some people saying that the 4 points that were awarded after round 1 should be scrapped and we should go back to 0. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I find it funny at this stage that people can have a comment and all of a sudden it generates so much news from one person's comment. But clearly we're in a 2020 season. As far as I'm aware, it's still 2020 and we've got games still to play. So, if the game's been played in 2020 and games continue to play in 2020, then clearly the results should count. And I think we've heard coaches from other clubs, even though they lost, agree with that notion as well. So, clearly you put everything into each game. The players put their body on the line. It needs to count for something. So, if we had lost by 10 goals, mate, we'd still say the same thing at North Melbourne, that it's the 2020 season. So any game that's been played in that season to this date, the results should stand.
It's good to hear that some of the other clubs that actually lost and won are saying the same thing, because I thought that might just be a legitimate 50-50 split right down the middle. Those that won want to keep the points, and those that lost want to reset to 0.
Yeah, well, I think any situation at the moment, whether it be the results from games, whether it be drafts or whatever the case may be, I think each club puts themselves clearly their situation that they're currently in, and needs to look at the best interest of their own club. But from a wider football perspective, and we can sit back and take a breath and think what's best for the game, I think that's still occurring as well.
You mentioned the draft there. We obviously have a situation where we did what we possibly could to increase our hand in the draft that would have taken place at the end of this year. And obviously right now we don't know what that's going to look like. Is the AFL asking us for our thoughts on what that might look like and how that might unfold? And a second part to that question, how do our recruiters know who's going to be good and who's not going to be good when there's no footy being played right now?
Yes, the AFL has certainly asked us for some feedback around a lot of things that are uncertain at the moment. So that ranges from how long we'll need to prepare to get back in the season for once this stand down period's lifted. So it ranges from that through to hubs, through to drafts. A lot of things are covered. So we've given our feedback. In terms of the future picks that are able to be traded these days, I think once that rule came in, then there needs to be a draft the following year. You can't be trading future picks and then you've traded into a future where there is no draft. So you take a lot of risks when you trade a future pick, because you go into the following year, there might be a player that's injured for their entire year. You don't get a great read on him. So you're basing it on the 2 years beforehand. You might miss out on players that just come out of nowhere in their final year. And we've seen that with Jackson McRae many years ago. He, going into that season, I don't think we'd heard of his name before. And within 4 weeks later, he's in the top 10 names on our list on our whiteboard. So you clearly take that risk as well when you trade into the future. But the one risk you should never take is that the draft doesn't eventuate. So plenty of risks are taken when you do things that we have done. But as I said, there should never not be a draft that when you've traded into the future. So
Sorry, continue.
I was going to say, mate, in terms of the recruiters, since the future picks have been in place where you could trade, the value on future drafts each club's looked at it a lot differently and put staff in positions to cover that. So if you're going to trade a pick, you need to know the value of that draft or your club's position on that draft. So each club across the AFL would have some sort of system in place where they're rating the draft for the next year and even the year after. So when you're making decisions, you're doing it based on your own thoughts and knowledge of the talent coming through. So out north, we've had that covered really well. So even if there's not another game played this year, we will still have enough knowledge and thoughts to be able to draft. Now, it wouldn't be a position where you would be in last year, where you've got every bit of evidence in front of you, but you've got enough still to make a call.
I think that's a really interesting point. I think that it's not just the draft year that makes up recruiters' minds and clubs' minds on players. There's a big, long journey that's taken place before that draft year, and there's, the talent that emerges is spotted a long way out potentially.
Yeah, that's right. And their ability on the football field's a massive factor in drafting, but it's not the only factor as well. So we've got some good knowledge of what the players have done in the past. Another year of evidence would be great. If that doesn't occur, then we can base it on the evidence we've got. And then the interviewing stage, I'm tipping that there'll still be a draft combine, so you see a bit more athleticism and how they interact with their teammates. And there's a lot of factors that go into picking a player, not solely on their football ability.
So with all the information that's out there at the moment, and you said before that one person's comment can obviously hit the headlines now because there's less news out there, so the media are probably looking for more things to write about, which is completely understandable. We all know how it works. But then there's the element of the players getting all this information as well. And they're probably relying on you. They're relying on Reece Shaw to find out what the actual go is. So how do you give that information to them? What processes are taking place with interaction with the players?
Yeah, we set up a group meeting every Monday. So we've still got staff working in the footy department throughout this period. So we catch up as a footy department. It's a very small footy department at this stage, but we catch up 3 times a week. And then on the Monday, we decide what the players need to hear. So we go around the grounds, give updates in our areas, and then we will do the same on a Friday if we see fit. So the players have got their own schedules throughout this time. We've filled it up and populated it really well so we can keep them on a routine, which we think is really important for young footballers throughout this period. But that's how we communicate with our playing group. We get everyone online, and we give the updates required. In terms of giving clarity around some things, it's really difficult. So some of my updates I've been giving them are updating that I've got no update. But I think it's still really important they hear from me and Reece in particular, that we deal with the AFL, and we're able to give some updates. Some of it might be minuscule, but it's still important they hear what we've got to say. A lot of it's been around state government rules and regulations, and the stay-at-home policies that are in place at the moment, making sure our players are industry leaders in this area. So we've got to work our way around still being able to do our program, remain fit, interact with your teammates online. So that's been important with our messaging, and hopefully our players are really strong and firm on what that looks like.
And another element, I suppose, is making sure the players stay engaged with the fans as well. And you guys have been amazing in terms of pushing the players to keep giving that access.
Yeah, it's another really important aspect of our program, Heath. And your team's been terrific with the content we've been able to put out there. I'm really proud obviously as a staff member, but as a North man, having a look on our website and seeing how much content we've got there for our fans and members and sponsors in particular. But our players, they've got great attitudes around giving the content. They understand it in this period that our members in particular want to see and hear from our players, and the platform on our website to be able to do so has really been well endorsed by our playing group, and we'll continue to push that message with them as well.
Brady, one of the other things that's come up in the discussions is this idea around hubs and teams. For those people who haven't heard, basically splitting up the competition into 6-6-6 and placing those teams within those groups in different states to try and obviously isolate them from each other, and then play games from that point of view. That would be an extremely hard thing to pull off in some respects, because you'd essentially be taking staff and players away from families and embedding them in another state for a little while. Is North Melbourne behind that idea? Is that something that we would entertain?
I wouldn't entertain anything at this stage, Heath. We think it's massively important that we get these 17 games played and finals, and as long as we don't put the health and safety of our players at too much risk, then we will look to play the games as much as possible. So if it does mean that we end up being in a hub situation, I don't think the hub situation will be a long-term thing. I think if it means for a 3-week period so they can get multiple games away, even 3 weeks seems a long time. But if we need to play 5 or 6 games in a 3-week period, then we'll do so. So we've started looking at the logistics of certain things, and at the moment it's really difficult, but it's our job. So we need to plan for things that might happen, and that doesn't stop at hub situations. It's obviously, it flows into soft caps and state leagues in the future, what may or may not occur. So whatever rulings come in, at least we've had a couple of months of prepping for if this rule does come about, but we're nice and prepared, and we know what it looks like from a financial point of view as well.
With everything that you talk to the players about, Braids, and the things that you say to them, we think this is a good idea, we don't think this is a good idea. Do you always do it with the viewpoint of having been a player yourself? Do you put yourself in their shoes because you know exactly what thoughts that they might be having around leaving family or playing games, up to 5 or 6 games in 3 weeks, etc.?
Yeah, I think with Reece and I know I don't look young, Heath, but with Reece and I not being too long out of the game, I think that's one advantage that we do have. We're both 38 years of age. As I said, I don't look it, but I, I think we can put ourselves in the players' shoes reasonably well, given that we aren't that long retired. Well, Reece certainly isn't, but I think that's one aspect we can look at and go, okay, how is this going to affect our players? At the end of the day, as GM and as senior coach, our number one priority is our players, and we will do whatever it takes to protect them, to work with them, to educate them, to make them better people. So we always look at player first mentality, and clearly things at the club are bigger than the person as well. But our role is to look after our players. So when it comes to talking about hubs, the first thing we're thinking about is, hang on, Goldie's got 4 kids. How's that going to work? Jed Anderson's got one on the way. How's that going to work? So clearly we look into those things and think, well, can we fly them back? Can we fly them back in? But yeah, to answer your question, we look at it from a player point of view. And obviously my job as well is to look at it from a club point of view. But when you're going to be in one place for a certain period of time and without family, then we certainly need to give that consideration as to how it's going to look.
When you think about this whole situation, how do you hope that we look back on it as a club?
Yeah, what a great question. It's at the moment our head's so into day to day, and Reece and the rest of our skeleton crew and footy department are working really closely with our players to make sure they're in the right headspace, to make sure their conditioning and their programs are being carried out. But to take a step back and have a look at how we come out of this is a great question, because we want to make sure that we come out of this with a really strong group that have survived this period really well. We're fit, we're mentally healthy. We're attacking the second half of the season in a manner full of confidence, because we've done our programs. The schedule and the routine that the footy department has set up for the players hopefully is industry leading. The tightness of the group, regardless of not being next to each other and spending so much time with each other as they're so used to, they've done it in other avenues. So we can hit the rest of the season with full confidence and play some really good footy, and hopefully bring the group together even tighter and show how much we love our footy, because we've missed it so much. So I think if we can get out of it with a unity and tightness as a footy club and as a footy team, and we propel into the second half of the year and even into future years, I think that'll be a good outcome.
Well, Braids, I want to thank you so much for giving us some time and amazing insight into what's going on in your world and trying to keep things on track with Reece and the players and the skeleton staff that you have at your disposal. But hope it all goes well, and hopefully we're not too far away from welcoming the fans back into stadiums and doing what we do best.
Yeah, cheers, mate. It'd be great, obviously, to get the fans back. It might take some time, but at the very least, hope our fans and our members can see our boys on the screen and do everyone proud. So thanks for your time, mate.
Thank you, buddy.